Welcome to the world of Mark's Money Mind. I am your host, Mark Troutman. This educational, personal finance show combines money lessons, timely topics, personal stories, and community wisdom to help listeners and viewers master their finances to enjoy a stress-free life of financial freedom. In this special guest episode, I talk with my good friend and fellow slacker, Kevin Sebesta, after our weekend event with the Rock Retirement Club in Grapevine, Texas. We had such a good time with our conversation that I neglected to ask him how people could reach out to him. He writes over at his blog, lifeandfire.com, and he's also a coach in the Rock Retirement Club, where he hosts the Coffee with Kevin or Cocktails with Kevin meetups, depending on the time of day it's held. Without further delay, let's jump into the conversation. Welcome to the world of Mark's Money Mind. We are here in Grapevine, Texas. I'm here with my friend Kevin Sebesta, and I'm your host, Mark Troutman. We have just finished the Rock Retirement Club's weekend roundup here, and we thought it would be fun to record a session talking a little bit about the concept of secure retirement income and alternatives to the 4% rule, some of the things we talk about in our retirement community. So welcome, Kevin. Thanks for sitting in with me.
We're doing this live, so anything can happen.
Yeah, anything can happen.
Well, combined live.
Yeah, there might be some editing, but we'll see. So one of the concepts that I thought was very interesting was the idea of secure retirement income. And our friend Jim Saulnier from the Retirement and IRA show graced us with his presence this weekend. So we were talking about that quite a bit. So why don't we talk a little bit about what secure retirement income is and what that means and the idea behind it. You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, let's talk about why we're here. We're here for the Rock Retirement Club's yearly gathering. It's a paid community that we're in with 1,300 members, and now there were almost 300 people gathered together for the 5th session of the roundup, and it's the 6th year of the club. So we were visiting with, talking with, sharing ideas with many people who are just a few years out from normal or early retirement. So the topic of guaranteeing a solid income stream for your financial needs was a key topic that we talked about, right?
Yeah, I think, it's an interesting concept. A lot of us in the FI community talk about the 4% rule and just living off your portfolio. And many people don't even take into account any kind of secure retirement income, which in general usually starts with Social Security. And I think one of the benefits of people in this club is we're a lot closer to that claiming age, so we feel more confident in that some or all of that will be available to us. But what is also valuable about that approach is that it frees up a lot of your portfolio to have fun. And that's one of the things that we like to do for sure. And so let's talk about what secure retirement income is and what should it cover. So let's first talk about what secure retirement income is. You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, so the idea that we've learned about more in practice is the guaranteed payments that are backed by large companies that are more of a protected category. Those include Social Security. Some people are in a pension structure from a company. Some of those pensions get their backing from the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corp, which is, as we learned more detail, U.S. taxpayers and the government. And that's not 100% for some large pension guarantees, but there is a calculation that protects those for some people who have pensions. And then another one that we talked a lot about, which Mark and I have had some comments from the FI community. Is it true you guys have looked at getting an annuity in the future? And I say, yeah, absolutely have. And what kind were we talking about as a possibility?
So I do want to back up a second, because one of the things that I think we all try to solve for in the financial independence community is how long are we going to live? How long does this money need to last? And the hardest part of that equation is determining the end date or end of plan, as we like to call it.
That sounds so great. End of plan. You're successfully dying.
Right. So the one thing that you're trying to solve for is, what if I live for a very long period of time? How do I ensure that I don't run out of money? And so if you can couple that with a stream of income that also does not run out of money as long as you live, i.e. what Jim Saulnier likes to call the bottomless cup of coffee, like you go to a diner and you have unlimited coffee, you'll drink as much as you want and it always gets refilled. And the concept of Social Security, for instance, is that concept where it doesn't run out. So if you live to 105, you're still going to receive your Social Security check. So coupling kind of the back end of the plan with that lifetime secure income from a, like you said, a deep pocketed third party, i.e. the US government or an insurance company if you're going to use an annuity, is so beneficial, at least for the base living costs. And we'll get into that. So that's kind of the idea of secure lifetime income. So the first thing that comes to mind is Social Security, and it does have a cost of living adjustment, which is awesome. Many couples, when they go into retirement and they're both receiving Social Security, and we can talk about what it can cover, but for most people, it will cover those base needs. Now, for singles, you might be a little short because your Social Security may not cover those base needs, and that's the case for me, for instance. So what I have done is set aside a portion of the portfolio to potentially buy a annuity, and this is, I like to call them the index funds of annuities. They're not sold widely because there's not a lot of commission in it, but it's a standard annuity where you put in a certain amount, a lump sum, and you get a payment for the rest of your life. It's a single premium immediate annuity, which is kind of like buying more Social Security when you think about it.
That sounds like a personalized pension.
Yeah, exactly. Like most people would say, they love pensions, but they hate annuities. And I agree, many annuities are really horrible and they're loaded with fees and they have all these riders and crazy things. But these are like this most simplistic type of annuity. Lump sum down, lifetime stream of income. It's like buying a pension. And most people wouldn't turn down a pension if they could get it, right?
You know, I was thinking about how the idea of guaranteed income every month in retirement is kind of like most people live with their paychecks. It comes in every couple weeks and they spend all of it. And then there's going to be more coming in. In a perfect world, it just keeps coming in. That's the idea behind guaranteed income when you're post-career, is that the money will come in no matter what you do. You know the amount, you know it's protected and backed, and you can spend that without worrying about your portfolios versus trying to calculate some way to pay your bills with some usage percentage or withdrawal percentage. Those are your base bills that it's really interesting when you stop getting a paycheck, how that just doesn't feel right. No matter what money you have in the bank, investments, retirement accounts, you have to start using your money somehow, and that requires math, and it's almost exponential out the number of years.
And we're also not talking about taking your entire portfolio and annuitizing it, right? So what we're talking about is just covering those expenses. And I like the way Jim talks about it. If you had no money, what expenses would you need to cover for the rest of your life, whether you had assets or not? So let's talk about what those are. And he has a nice little, what was it, FUTA? Or I forget what
That's what I write down, yeah.
So tell us what those expenses would entail.
So imagine this scenario where you don't have that $400 emergency fund. Like everything was spent living these go-go years, these fun bucket years, as we've talked about in the past. There's the food category, right? You need to eat. You need to have household supplies, toilet paper towels, whatever you use for your house, cleaning products. That's the food. That's a grocery store category if you buy things there. There's the utilities that keep the heat on, the air conditioning on, the lights on, the refrigerator, all these key things that just kind of fall together. There's the internet service that hopefully we all need. There's a cell phone that you might need. There's transportation costs. And here's the very interesting piece of Jim Saulnier Associates and Chris Stein do this. They say, if you don't have any money, one car will get you by, one type of transportation. You don't need two cars if you're a couple.
Or if you live in a city and you can use public transportation, it could be that too. It could be a bus pass or a train pass or whatever, yeah.
And if you're a fancy retiree, maybe you have your own driver. I don't know. But you need to get around, but you don't need two vehicles. You can coordinate your activities. Then you have housing costs, which are mortgages, rent, whatever those might be. It could be your apartment, getting a little apartment that you want because that's required for your life. And the last one is the healthcare. Hopefully we don't use it, but we all need to pay for that just in case, because that can really cripple a plan instantly. If you get hurt somewhere on vacation and you need to go to an urgent care, it's good to have the money set aside in a plan to pay for that rather than be stressed out from an injury and stressed out at urgent care. So it's food, utilities, transportation, housing, and healthcare.
And it could be also like sinking funds for some of those. So if you have a car in your transportation category, it's the depreciation of that vehicle as well to be able to replace it down the road. And healthcare would be your insurance premiums, but plus your deductibles and any out of pocket. So it's kind of a
AAA does that. AAA will simplify that for overall costs per year for different types of vehicle categories.
Right.
And that's just a simple button to plug in something. And I believe they replace cars every 5 years, so they have a trade-in value for your 5-year-old car. Hopefully people listening to this are not replacing with a new vehicle every 5 years.
And I think the reason for this concept, and at least it's attractive to me, and I think you and some of the other people in our Slacker community, I did mention we would have a Slacker on, and here we go. Here's one of our Slackers. Is that it then frees up the remainder of your portfolio to have fun, right? And the idea is instead of using a strict linear 4% rule where you can only spend a certain amount per year, we can front load some of that fund. So maybe we can talk about
I have a thought before that.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry to do that, but
do it.
I just scribbled that down. Mark and I are money nerds. Technically, we're money geeks because geeks are cooler than nerds. But with my household, my wife might have a different comfort strategy for how our bills are paid, how our bills are used or signed. We don't live off a 4% rule. We never even considered that. It was a threshold marker to figure out how things work. So yes, that seems to work based off of history and studies, but it also shows that 96, 97% of the time, you will be fine without adjustment, meaning at end of plan, you'll have extra money. And so we haven't exactly targeted that. But I did write down the strategies that we, Mark and I here with our friends and our peers in the Rock Retirement Club, because they talk about this a lot every week in meetups at different points. There's the guaranteed base rate life type funding that we've just been talking about. There's the 4% rule that sets you up with a structure, rule of thumb, that sets you up with a long-term structure for a 30-year retirement. There is the total return portfolio, where you look at how a portfolio grows over history and how yours might be doing at any given time to set up a yearly cash flow projection for the upcoming year based off of the current or previous year. And then there's one that takes that a little farther. It's called the guardrails. And guardrails look at the returns from the previous year, and they use high return, pull some of that off for the fun or the extra stuff, the wants and wishes of your days, not your base great life, minimum dignity floor stuff. And so you set a guideline. If the returns are low, you use very little of your portfolio, and therefore you live more to your base great life rather than the fun stuff because the market didn't pay for next year's fun stuff.
Yeah, and I think when you are working towards retirement, using something like the 4% rule or 25 times your expenses to come up with a target is a great approach for an idea of how much do I need. But I think what we've both found is that I've been retired now or living on my portfolio or assets for approximately 9 years, and you're in that same kind of category, is it's very different when you're actually drawing from that portfolio and utilizing those assets and then determining, can I use some earlier or do I have to wait to enjoy this? And then also trying to solve for that back end. And I found personally that having this kind of dual approach of covering my base living costs with this bottomless cup of coffee and then allowing myself to utilize those excess assets has allowed me to enjoy retirement to the fullest, I guess you would say, and doing all these trips and so forth without worry about will I be eating cat food down the road and living in a box.
You set aside some money to say hell yes whenever you wanted.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because even Mark, which is the money geek, didn't want to calculate the usage or withdrawal rate while he was on his cruise with the Mediterranean with some other slackers and some other friends. You get to where the calculations that get you here become a secondary thought for why you're here.
Yeah. And so we talked a little bit about the fun bucket. I don't know that I've talked about it a lot on this show, but we talked about it on Forget About Money. And I will link to that, and maybe I'll repost that as an episode at some point. But the idea of having this slush fund, I guess you would say, to do fun events. You want to talk a little bit about that? Any ideas on?
My first thought is we talk about sinking funds, setting aside money so that you can use it for home repairs or vehicles. And Mark and I are trying to do this set aside of this fund number, just shave off some money, put it in a separate account that tends to be from the cash account. So our asset allocation is equity percentage, secure income bond, some type of CD some people have, and then a chunk of cash. So the bonds and cash equal the fixed income, because now you're actually getting some income from cash, which makes it kind of, you don't really want to, and you don't really want to use it. You're like, oh, I was getting 5%. This is great. But then you have something come up that you want to say hell yes to. So we're learning that. So what we do is we set aside an actual account and titled it, because you can do that online, for some money. And the goal is that it's a sinking fund, because the idea is it's some of our extra money that is assigned to these adventures, activities, interests, hobbies, giving even in some ways. And we set that aside in a special account. And the idea is to draw that down, to empty the bucket, to fill it from the hopefully still larger source of fixed income that we have. And so Mark and I have pushed each other for over 3 years to do some of these things, to set it aside and do it. And we were asked in a little breakout session. It was kind of a medium-sized breakout session.
Yeah, there was about, I would say, almost 50 or 60 people in that.
Yeah, right around there. And it was overtime at the roundup, after the roundup ended, where we broke into some interest groups. And the question was, how do I know how much to do into this fun category? What is Jim and Chris from the Retirement IRA show call it the fun number,
which is all of the excess.
Yes,
and we were talking about a portion of that.
Yeah, because we saved correctly, like the numbers showed. But since we left our careers 9-10 years ago, we've had good returns, and we've continued our intentional, logical spending ways, which are underspending. And so those accounts grew. So we decided to take some money off the top. And the one thing I did was say, let's look at the brokerage account balance in our calculators and just lower it the next 100,000 down and rerun the numbers and see what happens. That was just the icing and sprinkles and cherries on top of our financial cake. Some people call it a pie cake. And so some people listening know what that means. I know what it means. I don't understand how it works, but it's like the 3-bucket theory: near term, midterm, and long-term asset allocations. And so we calculated our plans using Monte Carlo tools and a couple other tools with that money not included. So we knew the plans projected to be safe, and that money headed towards our fund bucket that we can use at any time. And it's a freeing concept.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to back up a little bit, because some people may still be a little confused or uncertain. Maybe we skimmed over it, with how much to set aside for a potential single premium immediate annuity. And maybe we can talk about how each of us is approaching that kind of secure lifetime income. When do we claim Social Security? How do we do it?
How do we calculate that for 40 or 50 years?
What?
The secure lifetime income. It's almost incomprehensible to do that, but we tried.
Yeah, and we did have some help to do that.
When in doubt, get a professional team that you trust and get their opinion.
So part of it really is figuring out what are those items for you today, how might they differ in the future. Maybe you're going to have a smaller house or rent instead of own a large house. or you're going to have a average car, maybe you have really nice cars or multiple cars now, and what would it be if you only had one? And then obviously there's some inflation aspect to it. But I do think the concept of when to claim Social Security, and for me, it's a fairly easy calculation at this point because I have survivor benefits and my own benefit. And it was interesting. We had a presentation at the Rock Retirement Club talking about when to claim Social Security and how to think about it. And for me, it's pretty cut and dry. I claim my survivor benefit at age 60 until age 70, and then I turn on my own benefit at age 70 because it can grow to its largest amount at age 70, but not beyond.
And that's not based off of break-even analysis.
No.
That's based off of a marriage survivor situation that you're forced into.
Yeah.
And it's the optimal because of age specifically, not necessarily amount of payment.
Well, in that case, there's only really one clear path that makes sense. But in a married couple, it appears, and there was some, question as to whether
I don't think we should say that what that presentation projected.
Right. But I think in general, I still feel that because of longevity insurance, which is really what you're trying to solve for, I think, in the scenario we're talking about.
Let's talk about why that is, right? So if you get many private company pensions, they might give you, let's say it's $2,000 a month when you start your pension. And that's not inflation adjusted. There's no COLA for many companies.
Cost of living adjustment, which is what COLA is, yes.
And so each year you're going down 2.5% of purchasing power as prices go up, but your amount that's direct deposited stays the same. So roughly the target is 3% inflation.
Yeah.
So average. That's 24 years-ish.
Right.
It's rule of 72 till everything costs twice as much as it did 24 years before. So if my wife or I were getting a $2,000 payment in 24 years, that will buy $1,000 worth of goods and services. And a 50-year retirement, then the goods and services will be 200, then 400%, and it will equal 500.
Is what?
My point is, I don't know.
I think the idea is that
my point is
delay,
Social Security is special because you get inflation adjustments, and you also, by delaying, you shrink the average life expectancy. It gives you less payment, so it increases the amount per payment, and it's inflation adjusted.
A lot of people think that as soon as they turn 62, which is the earliest that you can claim Social Security, they should turn it on because it might go away, or they want to get their money while they can.
Or someone told them it's available, like my Uber driver on the way to the airport. Mm-hmm. I swear, 2 months into retirement at 62, he realized it wasn't the same payment he was supposed to get based off of his statement, and now he's going back to work for a few years.
Right, and what's nice now, and I recommend everyone go to Social Security, SSA.gov, and download or create an account so you can download your statement, and you can see now they actually showed in bar chart format how much you would get at 62, 63, 64, all the way out to 70. And what you'll notice is that it increases by approximately 8% per year after full retirement age, which for most people is 67. And I believe it's 32% less if you take it at 62 versus 67. Correct. I'll have to double check that, but it is substantially less if you take it at 62, and it gradually grows to the maximum at age 70. But the idea of a couple, at least the higher earner taking it at 70, is that whoever lives longer gets to step into those shoes. So if you have the higher earner waiting until age 70 to get the largest benefit possible, if they live longer, they keep that obviously the rest of their life. If their spouse lives longer, once they pass, their spouse gets that benefit.
Right.
So it's really just a way to secure the largest amount of money for the rest of the lives of either spouse.
We hear in the Rock Retirement Club, people figured this out, but a lot of their comments are husbands often, they're older, so they were more traditional households. And the husband would think, I want to claim it at full retirement age, FRA, which might be 66 to 67, because they want to turn it on and they're not quite as healthy. And they want to start getting it now, but they don't realize often their spouse is younger and or has a lower primary insurance amount is the PIA, is what they call it, at full retirement age. The husbands often think about themselves, but not the survivor. So if there's two payments, the husband and a wife, or a wife and a husband, what Mark said about the survivor is important, because I often say you're both not going to be abducted by aliens at the same time. It's usually going to be one person is a survivor in a marriage, and marriage is specific to the Social Security claiming strategy, and that person's going to keep whichever of their two payments is higher for the rest of their longevity till end of plan.
And it can make sense for the lower paid spouse to potentially claim earlier, maybe even as early as 62 in some cases, or certainly full retirement age. And there's a whole claiming strategies out there as to how to do that. But in general, it makes sense for the higher earner to delay. And the idea is that then more of those lifetime costs, whether you have money or not, are covered as a result of that. Now, let's talk a little bit about if you're going to be short, and even in a married couple with both turned on at some point because of inflation, that combined paycheck between the two, as long as you're alive, or the single Social Security check, when one person passes, won't be enough necessarily to cover that. So how do we calculate how much to set aside for the potential purchase of a single premium immediate annuity, and why also are we not necessarily buying it today, which would be a deferred annuity, for example?
Haven't you watched the news? Social Security's going away. It's running out of money. We should just mention a blip from what we understand about that. The news says Social Security's going away. Mm-hmm. And so if you're younger, you think, I'm never going to get it because the old people are going to use it all.
Right.
Where's the first payments every year come from for everybody?
From everybody else.
Yeah. So when you're older and able to claim the strategy, all the other people working are paying in every single hour into the Social Security fund for that year, and that's distributed to those who are claiming their checks each month. And if that payment from all the working people is not enough, where does it come from?
From the federal government.
From the trust?
Well, from the trust fund that effectively right now is overfunded and will eventually deplete, and they will have to make some adjustments. And I was actually this weekend a number of times, do you think it's going to run out of money? What's the fix? There are multiple fixes that they can put in place to basically shore up the Social Security system, which I am pretty confident they will do. And especially if you're close to Social Security claiming, the odds of anything changing are pretty minimal, if existent at all. So I wouldn't worry about that. And there are multiple levers they can do to shore it up. So that wouldn't be a concern. But let's go back to how to set aside money for that gap when it potentially will happen, because there's this crossover point where your secure lifetime income, a combination of Social Security and pension, because many pensions aren't cost of living adjusted, or if they are, they're not to the extent that your base living costs might grow. How do we, and I can tell you how I do it, but I'm curious how you did it. How do you know how much to put aside to basically buy annuity if and when you choose to purchase one? How'd you do it?
Well, I wing it until I got a formal plan that actually puts some structure around it.
Okay.
As a secondary. I mean, that's the truth. I think about this, but I don't really take these full structural actions all the time, even though I look like I'm very professional and very organized.
Did you set aside anything for a single premium immediate annuity, or at least mentally set aside?
I am working through that. So I had a formal plan done in April. And the first thing we did was use some of our fund number for the past few months. And that seemed way better use of my time than setting aside the structure. So I'm planning a little bit of that structure now that it's October 2024. That took a lot of thought. And so it's fourth quarter. So I'm setting aside structure for the next few years. But I'm thinking about it in two ways. I'm not 67 or 70. So I'm thinking about between now and when I claim Social Security of what kind of money I'm going to need to pay my minimum dignity floor base great life. And then the fund hopefully flows separate from that. And then when I turn on those social capitals, my wife and I will have multiple streams of income, which will fill and pay for the minimum dignity floor immediately when we both turn them on. We're different ages. There's some years gap in between of turning them on, activating, claiming Social Security. And those are going to cover our base great life for probably 10, 12 years. After that, it's projected on the plans that housing, food, healthcare is going to inflate faster and cost more than the cost of living adjustment from Social Security, even though it's not supposed to, the CPI and all of that. So we're figuring out how much to set aside for the long term till end of plan and make sure that that money is in a fairly equity driven portfolio so that it's getting returns, hopefully above inflation, for, let's say, 20 years until that money is needed. So
and
it's
it
a
sounds
long
like
term.
yours is actually not a significant amount either. It sounds like your secure lifetime income is covering a majority until way back in the back end of the plan. Whereas for me, it's actually right at the beginning. So I'm going to be short even when I start claiming my full Social Security at age 70. So I actually had to calculate how much do I need to set aside. And the way I did it was I was able to calculate what will my needs be, how much will Social Security, because that's all I have. I don't have a pension. I don't have any other secure lifetime income coming in. I will have a shortfall, and I think it was in the neighborhood of 15,000 or something like that in that first year. And then
In a year, 15,000.
yeah.
Okay.
And then so what I did was I went out to their websites out there, and the one that comes to mind is Annuities.com. And you can say, if I was 70 years old, I'm a male in Colorado, and I want $15,000 of income, how much would I need to put down to buy that stream of income for the rest of my life? And I think it was in the neighborhood of mid $200,000 range, if I recall. I don't know exactly. I don't have my notes here, but it was in the 250-ish range, I think, or maybe it was even closer to 300. But like you said, that's for me, 11 or almost 12 years away. So I have the opportunity to put less money aside today, let it grow to that number. And of course, the 15,000 at age 70 will be more. So you have to offset it against inflation. But basically, I could say I need maybe a little bit less to put aside today to be able to buy that annuity in the future. And again, I'll let my 70-year-old self make that decision. Maybe I won't make it to 70. I won't ever need it, right?
What if you're younger and you want to have some fun? Eric Cooper set aside a structure that's been talked about to get his retirement accounts to pay for some fun. So he's doing that on his own side, not with a SPIA, but actually some structure. So figuring out a cost structure as things stack up, minimum dignity floor, a little extra wants that you want to do, and then extra fun stuff, you can kind of do that structure. And the reason I bring that up is because, Mark, you did your plan 2 months after I did my April plan.
Right.
Is your plan at all valid based off of projections for housing and everything now?
No, because things changed. I sold my house.
Within 60 days of Mark's formalized, professionalized, double check from a sideways perspective plan, 25% of it's all just adjusted out. So the point I'm making is, even though we're money geeks and we got professional opinions or services, our professional team, which is really good if you find someone you trust and believe in, it might only last for 60 days if a life change. It was thought about in the future, but it came upon fast after spending time with people. So the flexibility and having the vision of what you're trying to do and how you're trying to live. This whole thing we're talking about is how to live your best life.
Yeah, and I think that is also a poignant point, if that's even a way to say it. Is that how you say that? Is that this is a plan that it's constantly evolving. And so we talk about this stuff, we try to figure this stuff out. You do the best you can. We even had the case study here this weekend with our slackers. The summary of some of that is just you do the best you can. You can't figure everything out to the nth degree over the next decade. You try to figure it out the best you can. You work with that plan and you adjust as you go along. As Roger likes to say from the Rock Retirement Club, be agile. It's never going to be a concrete plan that you can just put on a shelf and follow to the T all the way until end of plan. You do need to adjust. And I think that's part of what we're trying to figure out all the time is what are the adjustments we need to make? How do we do this best? And how do we live our best life today? And I think that's what this process or this way of going about things is beneficial is that you can figure out, well, how do I take out those concerns that I have, which is really running out of money and a plan, but yet enjoy my life today. And I think that's kind of why we wanted to have this conversation, was just to say there's more than one way to skin a cat, I guess you could say. We could use a Jimism for that one, right? And I think that's a fair one.
He doesn't say skin a cat. And so that leads right into two thoughts I have is, one, we have dropped a lot of names of people that we respect who are professional planners, who have lots of experience with other people, who have both changed their planning strategy, even though they've been doing this for a couple decades, based off of the new input from other planners and retirees and soon-to-be retirees. And the reason I say that is because we keep learning too. And some of that input comes from partners, spouses. I might feel one way about planning a structure and a spending structure and an investment asset allocation structure and a timeline structure. That doesn't mean my wife feels the same way about the structure. She trusts me because we've gotten here, and I don't understand why she trusts me, actually. But I've proven myself, but I wouldn't live with me. And I've said that, and so Kathy knows this. But sometimes your partner has a different vision of what makes them comfortable and secure to sleep at night. And the case study that we did, that person had a very different vision of the IRMA costs in the future, and a very different vision of housing needs and aging assistance than some of the other slackers are considering. And so what makes that person in the case study feel comfortable and sleep at night is different from my wife and partner and Mark and I's strategy for all of this. I do things different than Mark, but I ask him all the time about, this is interesting. What do you think about this? And he says, well, I was thinking about this. And I said, well, all of a sudden you're moving now. How can I trust you? And so you learn with other opinions of people you trust, but you have to get real about your spending in the household and the comfort.
And I think that's a good way to end it too, is that you can do math to the nth degree, but you also need to be comfortable with the approach, right? And I think it was Devin Carroll that said he was talking to his wife who wanted to pay off their 1.9% mortgage. And he was like, mathematically, it doesn't make sense. Why would we do that? And she's like, it would just feel better to not have a mortgage. And so for many of these decisions we're making, whether it's having secure lifetime income that somebody else might be like, oh, my portfolio is fine. I don't need this SPIA. I don't need to worry about secure lifetime income. The 4% rule is great. Well, that's what makes that person sleep at night. And for somebody else, they may want to annuitize even more. I mean, we've talked to people that want to annuitize more than just the base great life or minimum dignity floor, because they just want that constant paycheck that makes them feel able to sleep well at night. So there isn't a right or wrong answer is what I'm finding. It's a combination of, yes, there's the numbers, but then there's also, how does this allow you to live your best life, right?
How do you feel living that at this season?
So money nerds have feelings is what we're saying.
The other ones do.
All right. Well, I think we'll end it here, and we could probably go on for a long time. But first, I have to say, I was thinking about this. The next time I'm going to see you is halfway around the world, right?
Down under in a different day.
Yeah. So we may have to record from down there near the Great Barrier Reef. We just chose our excursion, which looks beautiful.
We are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be with those dangerous animal creatures on the first day of Australia, hoping to survive for the next 33 days.
Yeah, so I will see you next time in a time zone, 14 hours away and halfway around the world. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. And
thanks. I hope this helps somebody live better.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again for sure.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks. See everybody next week, hopefully. Thank you for listening to this week's show. Please click follow on your favorite podcast player or subscribe on YouTube to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Also, please leave a rating and review for the show. This helps improve the ranking and enables other like-minded people find the content in their podcast players. If you would like me to answer a question on the show, please send it to mark@marksmoneymind.com and put podcast question in the subject line. Let me know your first name, or let me know if you would like to remain anonymous, and also your state of residence if you choose. I would also appreciate it if you would recommend this show to friends and family that might benefit from this content. See you next week on the Mark's Money Mind Show. Until then, make some, save and invest, live on the rest. And now for the all-important disclaimer. This show is for education and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered investment, tax, or legal advice. Please consult the appropriate advisor or advisors before implementing anything you hear on this show or any other show for that matter. While I fully intend for everything on this show to be true and accurate at the time of each recording, occasionally errors may occur. So please do your own due diligence on anything discussed.